There is a young female journalist, conservative journalist, by the name of Loomer.
If America's men acted like Laura Loomer, our problems will be fixed about time.
Chained herself to
She
Twitter.
chained her.
And welcome to tonight's episode of Loomer Unleashed. I'm your host, Laura Loomer. If you've been following my reporting over the last several months and you're a viewer of Loomer Unleashed, then you know that I've been documenting the war on school choice all across our country, the importance of school choice and how it's pivotal to Republican victories all across the country. And one of the states that's school choice has taken up a pretty heated debate recently is the state of Arizona, which is where I'm originally from. I was born and raised in Tucson, Arizona. And tonight I am joined by Tom Horne, the Arizona Superintendent of Public Instruction, who's also the former Attorney General of Arizona, to have a discussion about the importance of school choice and how school choice is impacting electoral victories in the state of Arizona. So Tom, thank you so much for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you here tonight on my program.
It's a real honor to be on your show.
Thank you so much. So I wanted to, talk about a lot of different things tonight, but as somebody who served as the Attorney General of Arizona, and now, of course, you're the Superintendent of Public Instruction. I know that you have had conversations with President Trump and members of the Trump administration about the importance of school choice. You are somebody who has seen great electoral success over the years. And so what does it feel like as a Republican in the state of Arizona to have had that success when so many other statewide Republicans have failed to have that level of success?
Well, I'm hoping that in the next election, the other Republicans will also get elected, because it's very difficult working with a Democrat governor who vetoes bills that I think are very important for the education.
Absolutely. And I know that was a pretty contentious governor election between Katie Hobbs and Kari Lake. A lot of people thought that there was voter fraud, myself included. I mean, that definitely was probably one of the most controversial gubernatorial elections that our nation saw over the last several years. Tom, President Trump saw his largest margin of victory in any of the swing states come from Arizona. What do you think that is a result of?
I think Arizona is becoming a more conservative state. The number of Republicans over Democrats has increased over time, and I think he had resonance here. Certainly, in my area of education, I've been very excited about the things he's been doing. I started fighting critical race theory in 2008 when they had it at the Tucson High School, where you're from, actually. And I wrote a bill at that time I was also superintendent of schools at that time, before I was Attorney General. And I wrote a bill to put a stop to critical race theory at the Tucson High School. It passed, and I did put a stop to it. Later on, when I went on to become Attorney General, there was some backsliding, and so we have to work on that again. But DEI is just really a continuation of critical race theory with a different name. And so I've been fighting it for quite a number of years, really. And it's exciting to have the president now taking an active part in that war.
Yeah, President Trump has taken some very bold initiatives in his second term as president. One of those initiatives, of course, was signing an executive order to get rid of the Department of Education, which has since been challenged by a litany of radical leftist activist judges who really appear to be carrying out a judicial coup in our country. And just this last week, we saw that I believe his name was Judge June. He's a Korean judge. He wasn't even born in this country. He was appointed by Joe Biden. And this judge overruled President Trump and said that he needs to reinstate the 1,300 employees from the Department of Education who were terminated, and that he's not allowed to get rid of the Department of Education, whether it's defunding it or completely terminating it. And the reason why President Trump wanted to get rid of the Department of Education, if you'll recall, is because of the DEI initiatives that are being funded by our taxpayer dollars, and also the LGBTQ agenda that is trying to transition minor children and wage a war on parental rights across our country. And so how excited does it make you that President Trump is spearheading the abolition of the Department of Education and has signed executive orders banning DEI and federal tax dollars going towards DEI initiatives, especially in the public school system? And what does that mean for students in Arizona?
Yeah, it makes me very excited. I'll tell you, when the president announced that he was shutting down the Federal Department of Education, I got calls from a lot of reporters, and they were expecting me to say, oh, that's terrible, we need the federal department. In a lot of other states, they were saying things like that. And I said, well, I'll tell you, if he shuts down the Federal Department of Education, this is the first thing that'll happen. And now they were really expecting criticism. And I said, I'll throw a party. And I said that because we can do a heck of a lot better job than the Federal Department of Education is doing. We already supervise schools, and then they supervise us. You have two departments doing what one department can do. My department has 600 people who do nothing but work on Arizona education. They know what's going on in the schools. The people in the federal department are in an ivory tower. They have no idea about our schools. A lot of times they make totally irrational demands. And if you use all that money for their salaries, we could raise teachers' salaries, which is something we've got to do in Arizona.
Do you think that the education system in Arizona is a model for other educational systems across the country and the other 49 states?
Yes, we have been a model. And in my case, it goes back to the 1990s. I was a big supporter. I was in the legislature in the 1990s, a big supporter of parental choice. And the Arizona, charter schools were just coming into being then. And the Arizona Senate, even though it had a Republican majority, passed a bill to limit the growth of charter schools. I was the chair of a conference committee to resolve the differences between the Senate and the House committee, which did not have that limitation. And the first thing I did was to kill that limitation. I thought the market should prevail. Parents should have as many or as few charter schools as they want. And as a result of doing that, during my first 2 terms as superintendent, we became the state with the highest percentage of students in charter schools in the country. Florida was second, and a lot of Arizonans enjoy that because Florida always claims to be first. But on this one, we were first and Florida was second.
So that being said, you would agree then that having access to charter schools is an essential part of promoting and protecting school choice?
Absolutely. Some of our charter schools are just absolutely fantastic. One of them was chosen as the best high school in the country, one of our charter schools. And as with ESAs, which I also fight for, if a child's needs are not being met by a school, the parents have to have the ability to send the child to another school where the needs are met. And I don't understand how anybody can say the parents don't have that right unless they're so immersed in ideology that they forget what's good for the students.
Here on my program over the last several months, I've been following closely the story of the Primavera Charter School that recently had their charter revoked following a decision by the state charter board. And I know that the meeting is taking place this Tuesday. And on the agenda during that meeting, they're going to be discussing Primavera. Ultimately, it was the state charter's decision to revoke their charter. Even though they are the largest charter program in the state of Arizona. They have over 20,000 students, as you know, and over 750 educational professionals. And one of the things that makes Primavera unique, and of course, that being in charge of public instruction in the state of Arizona, is the fact that they provide educational services to a lot of at-risk youth. And of course, these are students who would otherwise end up in juvenile detention centers or end up on the street homeless. Students in the foster care system who may or may not have another choice for, getting a high school education or getting an education at all, if it weren't for the educational system provided by the Primavera charter structure. And so what are your thoughts on the fact that Primavera had their charter revoked? Do you think that they were wrongfully targeted? I know that there was a left-wing reporter who appears to have had some political bias against President Trump, who seems to have targeted Damian Creamer, the head of Primavera, because he is a prominent GOP donor. He's donated to Donald Trump. He's donated to Carrie Lake. He donates to a lot of Republican candidates.
He's donated to me in a number of my elections. Mm-hmm. Well, so what Primavera asked of me, I did, and that is they wanted to be an alternative school. As an alternative school, the standards are very different, and so lower grades would still give them, or lower grades by the students would still give them a higher grade as a school. And they asked me to calculate if they had requested to be an alternative school, because during the past 3 years they had a good reason why they didn't, but they didn't request it. So they asked me to calculate if they had been a charter school, what would their grade have been. Because they were terminated for being a D school 3 years in a row. So we did that calculation. It takes a lot of effort, actually, but we did it. And we concluded that based on the numbers, there are some other elements that the charter board uses, but based on the numbers, if they had requested to be a charter school, to be an alternative school, they would have been an alternative school. And in that case, they would have gotten C's rather than D's, and they would not be subject to being terminated. The decision now is up to the charter board, and I can't invade their turf. If I did, they'd resent it, and it would have the opposite effect. But I've given them the ammunition of those calculations that they needed, and that's all they've really asked of me, and I've done it.
Yeah, and you highlighted the fact that they were called a failing school, and that's the biggest issue here, right? Is that Craig Harris stated that their charter was revoked because they were a failing school. However, unsurfaced emails from you yourselves show that, as you just said, you would have given them a C rating, which is not classified as a failing school, according to the grading system that you guys have in place there for the schools. A C is not the same as a D or an F. And so that being said, do you think that Craig Harris's report is inaccurate in calling Primavera a failing school? And do you think that their charter was unjustly revoked for being a so-called failing school when you yourself in your email said that they would be listed as a C?
Well, as I mentioned, all they've asked of me was to do the calculations, which I did. But as I mentioned, I really can't tread on the turf of the charter board. It would have the opposite effect. So my role is to provide them with the data so that they can make their argument. And I
understand that. And I understand that. But if you look at a system, right, like A through F, the definition of failing would be D or F, not necessarily a C. Is that correct? That right. C is not the definition of what it means to be a failing charter.
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that, if that's the case, then it appears that Craig Harris's reporting is completely inaccurate, because a failing school, by your own definition, which you just said, would be a D or an F. And I understand that you're leaving this decision to the charter board, and they're going to have this meeting on Tuesday, June 3rd.
And I'll be at the meeting.
You are going to be at the meeting,
Laura, and I'll be explaining the calculations that we did. And in addition to that, I'm going to talk about what we've done to help charter schools in Arizona. Last year, we got more money per charter school from the federal government than any one of the other 50 states. We were number one out of 50 states in the money that we got from the federal government for charter schools.
So given the fact that you calculated that their school rating would be a C, do you think that their charter should have been revoked? I know that you don't have a say in whether or not it can be reinstated, and you don't want to say that, but if a C is not a failing grade, should their charter have really been revoked?
Well, the issue is that they didn't apply to be an alternative school. We did the calculation. Would they qualify to be an alternative school based on the numbers we found that they would? And then if they did qualify to be an alternative school, they would be a C, and they would not be failing. But what the charter board is considering is that, in fact, they did not apply. And I think they had some good reasons for that. But the fact was they did not apply. So the charter board will have to make that decision. And then that's not the final decision. They are able to appeal to a administrative law judge who will make a neutral decision on it.
But that goes along with what I was saying about the dishonest report of Craig Harris. This appears, what it really appears to be when you look at all the facts, as you just stated, it appears to be a paperwork oversight, an error in not filling out the proper paperwork, as you said, to register, not necessarily being a failing charter school. And so it seems that Craig Harris's reporting failed to mention the paperwork oversight, which I believe Damian Creamer and the Primavera staff have been very honest about. It's my understanding that Damian Creamer's wife was very ill at the time, right? And that he was taking care of
Mexico with her.
Yeah, he was taking care of his wife who was on her deathbed, and he delegated the paperwork to other officials who dropped the ball. But that is the real reason why their charter was revoked, as opposed to them being a failing school, correct?
Yeah, and what the charter board said was that they were not an alternative school. They didn't apply for it, and they were, and as not an alternative school, they got 3 Ds, but they're going to have to look at it. Our calculations that we've given to Primavera, and the fact that he had what I'd referred to earlier as a good reason, which you just described in detail, for why they did not apply.
Mm-hmm. Senate President Warren Peterson and other school choice advocates in the legislature have called on the state board to end what they are calling the political persecution of Primavera and Damian Creamer. Would you say that this is an example of political persecution in the state of Arizona by the state charter board?
I don't view it that way. I know some of the members of the charter board, and I don't think they would be motivated by that. I think that Primavera does have an argument to make and an appeal to make, but I'm not going to be criticizing the charter board.
President Trump has also called school choice the civil rights issue of our generation. Do you agree with President Trump?
I totally agree with that. And I've given examples because, when people attack the charter system, which mostly the Democrats, the people on the left do that, they also attack me personally. And even if they don't, the reporters come to me for a response. And what I say is, we have families with 3 kids. 2 of them are doing fine in the neighborhood public school, but one of them's needs are not being met. So they have the ability to send that child now that we have ESAs to a school that does meet the child's needs. And as I mentioned earlier, Laura, how can anybody say they don't have a right to do that unless they're just immersed in ideology and not thinking about what's right for the students?
Yeah, and I will say it's a winning issue here in the state of Florida as well. I'm from Tucson, Arizona originally, as I said, but I've been living in Florida for most of my adult life. And I know that one of the reasons why Ron DeSantis was capable of winning such a tight gubernatorial race when he was running against Andrew Gillum was because of the issue of school choice. And a lot of very prominent Republicans here in the state of Florida won their elections on the school choice issue. Byron Donalds who has now since filed to run for governor of Florida in the 2026 election year, also won his election on the school choice issue. And it's been reported that President Trump was able to pick up such wide margins of the Black and Hispanic population that traditionally vote overwhelmingly Democrat because he campaigned on school choice, while the Biden administration was running on a campaign of anti-parental rights, LGBTQ indoctrination, DEI, critical race theory, all this type of indoctrination, and a war on charter schools and a war on school choice.
Laura, I'd like to comment on that because the Title IX, people fought very hard for Title IX to give girls the opportunity to compete and excel in sports because they had not had the same opportunities that males have had. The Biden administration issued a directive saying that it's a violation of Title IX to keep a biological boy out of competing with the girls. That's completely crazy. That's the exact opposite of what Title IX was all about. And the newspapers are full of stories about girls who work really hard to excel in their sports, hoping to make the team or maybe get a scholarship or maybe even make the Olympics. And then they come up against a biological male who has the advantages of muscles and the other physical advantages that males have, and they're devastated. Their dreams are shattered. They're devastated. And I don't wonder why the people who defend this don't have more sympathy for girls that are subjected to this. So I'm fighting a lawsuit on this to be sure that we don't have biological boys and girls sports in Arizona. The Democrat Attorney General refuses to represent me, so I have to spend education money doing it. But I'm really determined. We'll go to the U.S. Supreme Court if we have to. We are going to keep biological boys out of girls' sports, out of their bathrooms and their showers and their locker rooms, and bring common sense back to Arizona schools.
Why did the Democrat Attorney General refuse to represent you? Did they give you a reason other than the fact that they don't know what the definition of a woman is?
Well, the Democrat Attorney General has never practiced law, and she doesn't know what her duties are. So she said she had a conflict of interest because she didn't agree with me. That is not a conflict of interest. A conflict of interest is if you've represented one of the parties. But you have a duty to defend departments, and you have a duty to defend statutes, which we have, that are challenges being unconstitutional, which is what this case was about. And I represented a number of causes that I didn't necessarily agree with because that was my duty. She has no ideas what her duties are, and she even campaigns against our initiatives. We have an initiative that says students that are English language learners have to be taught in structured English immersion and not bilingual or dual language. And I have a lawsuit against 10 districts who are violating that, and she's actively taking their part. She and the Democrat governor are taking their part to subject these kids to bilingual classes, which is directly contrary to Arizona law under an initiative passed by the voters, and directly contrary to the interests of the students who have to learn English if they're going to succeed in academically and in our economy.
It's also contrary to the recent executive order signed by President Trump declaring that English is the official language of our land. I mean, he even just signed an executive order making it illegal for truck drivers to not speak English in our country. So it's certainly an issue of public safety and also compliance with federal law, because as we have seen in the state of Arizona, which of course is a border state, the Democrats have flooded the public school system with illegal alien students. And as a result, most of the money, as it relates to taxpayer funds in the state of Arizona that go towards education, are not going towards at-risk students in charter schools, which is what the argument was made by people like Katie Hobbs and people like Craig Harris in this hit piece on Primavera. But the money is actually going towards public schools. And so what can you do as the Arizona Superintendent of Public Instruction to make sure that taxpayer money is not being abused or going towards DEI initiatives or going towards educating illegal aliens or going towards forcing all English proficient students to be subjected to bilingual and, therefore a degraded quality of education by being subjected to taking classes in the public school system with illegal aliens. What are you doing to start implementing these executive orders within the Arizona public school system?
Yes, as I mentioned, all the battles that you just referred to, I've been fighting since 2008. And so it's so great to have the president supporting that. And so I'm enthusiastically enforcing his rules. So he says, if you don't sign a statement that you won't have DEI, you lose your federal funding. And so I've told the schools, you better sign the statement because your funding will be taken away. Now, in this case, as with the question of girls in boys sports and the one other issue you mentioned, district judges have interfered, but I feel very confident that they'll be reversed on appeal, certainly by the time it gets to the U.S. Supreme Court. So I've told the schools, if you don't sign the statement, you are really going to lose your federal funding. Unlike superintendents in other states that have been critical of it, I've been enforcing it enthusiastically. And as I mentioned earlier, if we need to bring these cases to the U.S. Supreme Court, we need to do that. But we can't have DEI being. Now, the other thing about DEI is some of them may sign the statement, but do what they want. So I have a hotline where parents can contact me about schools doing the wrong thing. When I established it, when I was first elected to my third term in 2023, and the teachers union said they were going to have a massive march against my hotline at the department. So we counted the people who came. 15 people showed up out of 60,000 teachers in the state. So they didn't have the massive march they wanted, and parents now have a way to contact me directly because, during COVID, parents saw what was being taught, and they rebelled, and they went to school board meetings, and they weren't always treated courteously at the school board meetings. So I established this hotline so they could contact me directly, and where we find things that are done wrong, if I don't have the power to stop it because we're a local control state, I publicize it, and that usually results in them changing their course.
If the state charter board can act so swiftly to shut down, charter schools or, revoke their charter or find issue with funding going towards charter schools like Primavera that's serving at-risk students, what other measures, along with this hotline, of course, that you just mentioned, can be taken to hold other schools accountable in the state of Arizona that are receiving billions of dollars in taxpayer funds every single year for the public education of Arizona youth?
Well, President Trump came up with the best possible solution, which is they lose their funding. They rely on federal funding. We get a lot of federal funding for the schools, and that will have its impact. And I'm enthusiastically enforcing that here in Arizona. It's so good to have the president's support on that.
What do you think about President Trump's recent threats to strip California of their federal funding if Gavin Newsom doesn't immediately put an end to biological males competing in girls' sports?
Boy, I couldn't agree more. I first was outraged by this many years ago when a court in New York made the tennis people let biological males play in women's tennis, and a crazy district judge said that they could do that, or that they had a right to do that. And I've been mad about that ever since then, which is many years ago. I'm fighting very hard against to keep biological boys out of girls' sports.
And so I know that you said that you were pushing back on claims made by some of the members of the Arizona State Legislature that they think that Primavera is being politically persecuted because they now have a Democrat governor, and they also have a lot of Democrat officials that don't like Damian Creamer, and they also don't like the idea of charter schools in general. And so would you say that there's any element of political prosecution, or do you think that this is just a simple misunderstanding between the board and Primavera leadership?
Well, it may be something. I mean, the board is considering the situation now that we've produced these statistics, and it may be a situation that changes either by the charter board or by an administrative law judge. But I think most of the members of the charter board were appointed by Governor Ducey, who is a Republican. So I'm seeing it as a different view of the issues, not as persecution in my point of view. I don't argue with the president of the Senate taking a different point of view. I have a very high regard for him, I think I've done my role by furnishing Primavera with the statistics that they need.
If they were to ask you while you're attending this meeting on Tuesday whether it's your opinion that their charter should be reinstated, what would you say?
I'd say I'm not imposing on your turf.
Okay.
If I do that, it'll cause resentment, and it would have the opposite effect of what I might say.
State Treasurer Kimberly Yee announced last week that she intends to run for your seat next year. Are you also planning on running?
Oh yeah, I have just about all the signatures I need to qualify for the ballot, and I can't even have them until next year. So I'm running hard. Would you like me to describe the different opinion between her and me?
Yeah, no, I would love to. I'd love to know what the differences
Yeah.
in opinion are,
Yeah,
because I'm sure that a lot of people are going to be watching this week,
Right.
as it relates to what happens with Primavera. So I feel like this is a great opportunity for you to lay out the differences between you
Sure.
and Kimberly Yee.
Well, yeah. So my predecessor was a Democrat, and what she did was anything a parent asked for, they got, including things that weren't really educational. And then that information went to a group called SOS, Save Our Schools, which is against ESAs, and they would publicize and say, look how wasteful ESA is. They're paying for things like ski tickets. When I took office, I established two principles. Principle number one is the expenditures would only be for valid educational purpose, and number two, at a reasonable cost according to market prices. I believe that is the duty of any administrator administering taxpayer funds, and Yi has adopted this idea that I should have to pay anything. If I did that, if I had done that, or if she were elected and she did that, let me tell you some of the things that would have been paid: a $5,000 Rolex watch, a $24,000 golf simulator, over $1,000 fancy Mont Blanc pen, and believe it or not, I even got a request for a vasectomy testing kit to be paid for out of taxpayer dollars. I have a list of 35 things which is available to the public, similar kinds of outrageous requests that have been made. If that happened, it would be big publicity. The public would react, and the survivability of the ESA program would be in jeopardy. And I am a very strong believer in it. I've been fighting for parental choice, as I mentioned, since the 1990s. I'm a strong advocate for ESAs, and I want it to survive. And that means it has to be administered. I think any administrator of taxpayer funds has to be administered in an honest and reasonable way. And I think this idea that she has, that I would have had to have paid all these things, is completely crazy. I don't understand how she would adopt such a view.
Yeah, it makes sense. Any last comments? Any last thoughts that you want to leave with the viewers? I know we have a lot of viewers. It's a national audience, but we have a lot of people that follow us from Arizona, of course.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm proud that we're the leader in ESAs. A lot of states have followed our lead. Our administrator meets with the administrators of the states that have adopted ESAs a very frequent basis, and he tells me that our applicants have a lot more freedom than they do in the other states. For example, up to $4,000, which is a reasonable amount, we will furnish them with a musical instrument. In these other states, they make them rent them rather than actually give them the musical instrument. But one of our cases was somebody wanted a $16,000 cello, and you get a perfectly good one for $4,000. So that was unreasonable use of taxpayer funds. We're doing everything we can to make this a successful program. When I took office in 2023, there were 12,000 participants in ESAs. Under my administration for 2.5 years now, we've got it up from 12,000 to 87,000 applicants. So it's been a very successful program. And Kim Yee's just come up with a crazy idea that would really harm ESAs.
Well, Tom, I really appreciate you coming on my show tonight and having a discussion about this. I've been following this case as it relates to Primavera ever since the controversy first began. And being from Tucson, Arizona, I'm very interested in making sure that Arizona doesn't fall under Democrat control, and that we're able to have strong leaders, strong Republican leaders who are protecting parental rights and making sure that Arizona children are not being indoctrinated, and that Arizona remains a state where school choice and charter schools are also protected. So I really appreciate everything that you're doing, your support for President Trump and your alliance with President Trump and his educational policies. And I just really appreciate you coming on to share your vision and your perspective. So I'll be following this closely.
As I mentioned, I consider it a real honor to be on your show. I agree with you on all of these issues, and I'm fighting as hard as I possibly can on them, as well as to keep Republican possession of this office rather than have it go to a Democrat because of unnecessary divisions in the Republican Party. And if you ever want me back, I'd love to come back.
Wonderful. Well, we will definitely have you back in the future as the topic of parental rights and the continued debate over whether or not these activist judges really have the authority to strike down President Trump's order to shut down the Department of Education continues. We're definitely monitoring this judicial coup closely, especially as it relates to the executive order around DEI and the Department of Education. So thank you so much.
As a former Attorney General, I will venture a prediction those will be reversed on appeal.
Let's hope, right? Because we can't allow for activist judges appointed by anti-American Democrat presidents, many who believe are illegitimate in their own accord, to be overruling the executive. It just seems like what's the point, right? What's the point of even having elections and having a president if these rogue judges are just going to shut everything down? I mean, you have to have the power of the executive. They call it an executive order for a reason. You can't just have judges shut down every single order that President Trump is making. He had a mandate. People voted for him overwhelmingly, and he won every single key battleground state, because the American people overwhelmingly support his policies and his vision for America, especially his vision for American children and American families.
Well, I've gone out on a limb and made a prediction that on these decisions by district judges that we discussed, they'll be reversed on appeal.
Let's hope. Well, thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate you. Where do people follow you if they want to, contact you, reach out to you, follow you on social media?
Yes, my website is tomhorne.com. That's kind of easy, except that Horne has an E at the end. And we do have social media. I don't remember the addresses offhand, but I'll furnish those to you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Laura, and please have me back.
Yeah, thank you. Best of luck at the meeting on Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, that, of course, was Tom Horne, who is in charge of public instruction as the superintendent in Arizona. He's the former attorney general of Arizona. And this is an interesting battle, and we're going to be monitoring it here closely on Loomer Unleashed. And we will be sure to update you with the decision of the state charter board and how this battle is playing out as Republicans fight with a Democrat governor and fake news media to keep control of parental rights and the ability for charter schools like Primavera, which is the largest charter school system in the state of Arizona, to freely operate. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight. See you next time on Loomer Unleashed.
There is a young female journalist, conservative journalist, by the name of Laura Loomer.
If America's men acted like Laura Loomer, Our problems will be fixed in about 5 minutes.
Chained herself to
She
Twitter.
chained her.
Now,